Okay, whatever it takes. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to welcome you to the Luxembourg American Cemetery. Today's ceremony commemorates the 75th anniversary of the commencement of the Battle of the Bulge. On this day, we remember and honor the fallen who made the ultimate sacrifice and their World War II battle comrades who have joined us here today. Today's military guard is provided by the Luxembourg Honor Guard and the United States 101st Airborne Division, Screaming Eagles. Our military band is provided by the United States Army Europe Band and Chorus and by the Luxembourg Military Band. I am Rob D'Alessandro, Deputy Secretary of the American Battle Monuments Commission, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies today. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the presentation of the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Leveraging Allied air power was key to victory during the Battle of the Bulge. However, horrific weather conditions grounded bomber and fighter aircraft, denying the Allies this critical edge. It was not until much later in the campaign that the Allies could bring their superiority in air power to bear against the German offensive. In a few moments, I'd ask that you direct your attention to the sky. To mark the importance of air power, we will witness a military flyover. First, you will see an Airbus H-145 Mike multi-purpose helicopter of the Luxembourg Army, followed by 4 F-16 fighters from the 480th Fighter Squadron stationed at Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel a little like General Patton. We need a little bit of a weather prayer here, but we got our air. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the invocation.
Good afternoon. In December 75 years ago, the commander of the 3rd United States Army, General George S. Patton, asked his chief chaplain if he had a prayer for weather. General Patton shared with his chaplain, "We must do something about the rains if we are to win the war. We must ask God to stop these rains. These rains are that margin that hold victory or defeat." Chaplain O'Neill, his chief chaplain, strongly believed that those who pray do more for our world than those who fight. So he wrote this prayer for General Patton, commonly known as General Patton's Battle of the Bulge prayer. A month later, General Patton and Chaplain O'Neill would meet up again here in Luxembourg. General Patton congratulating his chaplain, telling him, "Our prayers worked. I knew they would." At this time, would you bow with me for a quick word of prayer? Gracious Lord, I thank you for all who are assembled here today, especially our World War II veterans. And we thank you for answering our prayers. May we always be mindful that the earnest prayer of a righteous person has great power and produces wonderful results. This we pray in your holy and wonderful name. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the Secretary of the American Battle Monuments Commission, the Honorable William M. Matz.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Luxembourg American Cemetery. The American Battle Monuments Commission is proud to co-host with our embassy and the government and Grand Duke of Luxembourg this very special commemoration of the 75th Battle of the Bulge. This afternoon's ceremony culminates a four-day international commemoration of the largest land battle fought in the West by the Allied forces in World War II. It is indeed an honor to be with you today and to extend a very warm welcome to His Royal Highness, the Grand Duke of Luxembourg, and to our many other distinguished government and military leaders. And of course, to the citizens of Luxembourg, whose visits to our cemetery throughout the year ensure that the service and the sacrifice honored here is not forgotten. America thanks you. And a particular warm welcome, folks, to the veterans of the Bulge. I believe we have about 15 with us today. Their courage, their perseverance under relentless attack in bitter winter conditions we can only imagine. They, however, vividly recall the horrors of that battle. Please give them a hand. Thank you. The mission of the American Battle Monuments Commission is to commemorate the service and the sacrifice of United States Armed Forces. And it's a sacred duty that we perform on behalf of the American people every day. We do this by tending the graves and the memorials of our fallen servicemen and women that are buried and memorialized at our 26 American cemeteries around the world. We do so also by preserving the stories of their deeds and those that fought by their side, that bequeath the blessings of freedom to generations yet unborn. We are guardians of the war dead entrusted to our care, documenting and preserving the stories that they can no longer tell. For the American soldier, the Battle of the Bulge is second in scale only to the Meuse-Argonne campaign that ended the First World War. Today, the guns are silent. The battlefields lie lush and peaceful. But there was nothing quiet or peaceful about the Bulge. The Ardennes forest was devastated as the outmanned Allied forces bent but did not break under the withering assault. For 6 weeks, the battle raged in some of the coldest weather any of those on the ground had ever experienced. We had more than 15,000 cold weather-related injuries. Nearly 10,000 American soldiers were killed, more than 45,000 were wounded, and more than 20,000 missing or captured. Winston Churchill said of the Battle of the Bulge that it was undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war and will, I believe, be regarded as an ever-famous American victory. So we began this weekend right here, this weekend of commemoration in this cemetery on Friday evening. Each of those headstones in front of you in the hallowed grounds was illumined by a candle, a beautiful and simple act of remembrance of what they did for us 75 years ago. Each candle, a reminder of our responsibility to keep the torch of freedom brightly as a guiding light for generations to come. Whenever I visit one of our ABMC cemeteries, I am reminded of the poetic words of the great Archibald MacLeish from his poem, The Young Dead Soldiers. They say we were young, we have died, remember us. They say we leave you our deaths, give them their meaning. Today, by our presence, we give their deaths meaning. For the character, folks, of a country can be determined by the way it takes care of and remembers its war dead, and it's a measure of its very heart and soul. So thank you again for joining us today as we fulfill the promise made by our first chairman, General of the Army's John J. Pershing, that time will not dim the glory of their deeds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency J. Randolph Evans, United States Ambassador to the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg.
His Excellencies, the many VIP guests, so many of my friends and colleagues, it is an honor to be here. But I pose a question for you. And the question I pose is, why are we here? Why are we here now? Why are we here on this day? Why are we here at this cemetery? If you think about that question for a moment, you will realize that the answer is actually a little different than you're probably imagining. The reason that we are here is because we can. Why can we be here? Why can we honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice? Why can we be here to honor these men who put everything on the line? Why can we be here to honor these men and one woman who did in fact give it all? Why is it we can be here to thank them all for the sacrifices they make every day? And it is because there were those who were willing to stand up. They were willing for those in the name of freedom, independence, democracy, the ability to have free spirit, to be whoever we wanted to be. They were willing to do everything so that we could have that right. And we all chose to come here this day, at this moment, to say thank you. Thank you for their service. Thank you to your service. Thank you to the service of all of the fine servicemen that are in the audience today. And thank you to the United States of America, the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, all of the wonderful allies that stood with us in the face of oppression and tyranny to say, no, we will never give in because what we believe in is the very ideal that sets us free. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency, Mr. Xavier Bettel, Prime Minister of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg.
Your Majesties, allow me first to extend my heartfelt and warm salute to the veterans of World War II who are among us on this very moving and symbolic afternoon. Madam Speaker, Mr. President, dear Secretary of Defense, Excellencies, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, during the unusually severe winter of 44-45, the Nazi regime launched a desperate surprise attack on December 16, 1944, on the Western Front. They planned to go through the Ardennes region, hoping to capture the port of Antwerp. This was crucial for the supplies of the British and American allies, and perhaps to drive a wedge between both armies and bring about a seventh Dunkirk. When in late 45, the last German forces had been driven back, again beyond the front line of December 16, 44,000 of military and civilian victims were to be mourned. More than 1/3 of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg and much of eastern Belgium lay devastated. And yet we know what, without resolute and courageous action of General Patton, the strategic situation might have gotten out of hand for the Allies against Hitler. Just 1 year after the Battle of the Bulge, the daring, fearing nothing general was severely injured in a car crash in Germany. He passed away on the 21st of December 45, and according to his wish, was buried here in Luxembourg earth. It is highly symbolic that General Patton should have been laid to eternal rest amongst his soldiers in this very cemetery of Ham. Here are aligned the crosses and stars of David, marking the graves of 5,076 brave American soldiers belonging mostly to Patton's 3rd Army or to the valiant 28th Infantry Division. And I have to tell you, this afternoon during my lunch, I was lucky to sit next to a veteran, sitting next to Mr. Georges Merz. And I spoke to him about his experience, how it was. And he told me that he left American States the day of his 19th anniversary, leaving his country. He was one of the few veterans I met who knew before where was Luxembourg. But believe me, from these thousands of young guys and women who died, a lot of them didn't even know where my country was. And they came to fight for us. They came to fight for values, as we spoke yesterday, for democracy, for peace. And we should never forget also, when we speak about soldiers, then behind the soldiers you have parents. I spoke before to a young American soldier at the entrance, and he explained me all the medals he had. And he said this was Iraq, this was Afghanistan. And I asked him if he had children. He said yes. I said, for you it's a difficult job, but for them it's a difficult time to wait for you to come back home. For your wife, for your children, for your parents, for your sister and your brothers. And all these guys and young ladies had no chance to have a long life because they did what they did for us. And you have to know that in Luxembourg, we just celebrated also the 100th anniversary of the accession on the throne of Duchess Charlotte, your grandmother. In late April of this year, we mourned the death at age of 98 of your father, Jean, who succeeded her on the throne in 64 and was Grand Duke until the year 2000. For many of us, you have to know that Duchess Charlotte And Prince Jean, Grand-Duc Jean at that time, but Prince Jean at that time, and we saw it also during the film when we celebrate the 100th anniversary, an image, a picture of the Grand-Duchess Charlotte was a fact, a sign of to believe in freedom and to believe also in peace. And they had to leave Luxembourg to go to Great Britain, Canada, and United States. And you have to know that it was US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt who promised Grand-Duchess Charlotte during a visit she paid him in the White House in 1942, "I will bring you back home, my child." The first personal ties between the Grand Ducal family and President Roosevelt date from the somber days of the outbreak of World War II in early September 1939, when Poland was attacked by Nazi regime. Prince Felix, the husband of Grand-Duchess Charlotte, and the 18-year-old Prince Jean had lunch with President Roosevelt. And this was the first inaugurated the later important personal relations between both. I really would like also to say thank you to you, President Gauck. It's a symbol to sit here together today. And when we see what is happening around the world, we should never forget that peace is never granted. And the enemies of yesterday are the friends of today. And if it's NATO, if it's the European Union, this continent has never lived such a long peace period than we have today. But we should never forget, peace is never granted. And we should not accept people who want to promote part of our history from the darkest side we have lived on our continent. Thank you to you, veterans. If I'm able to stand here in front of you today, to speak freely, to have been elected freely, to live in a free country, in a democracy, it's because you did. For you it was, for some of you it was just a duty, a part of your job. For us, it was to gain our liberty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States Secretary of Defense, the Honorable Dr. Mark T. Esper.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to participate in today's ceremony to pay tribute to the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. I would like to extend a very, very special welcome to our World War II veterans who are here with us. Thank you, men. Thank you very much. Your stories are remarkable, and we will forever be grateful for the incredible sacrifices you made in defense of our freedom so many, many years ago. Today, we are gathered at the American Cemetery in Luxembourg to honor the 5,076 Americans buried here who laid down their lives in the gallant stand against tyranny that would ultimately liberate Europe from Nazi control. This ceremony, on these beautiful and peaceful grounds, commemorates their sacrifices, along with the more than 500,000 others who faced great peril as they fought to push back Hitler's last major offensive on the Western Front of World War II. On December 16, 1944, the nation of Luxembourg became the front lines in the years-long struggle of freedom versus tyranny. Facing frigid temperatures, low on supplies, and without the advantage of air support, the Allies initially gave way to the surprise Nazi offensive. But despite the early setbacks and the bulge that developed in the battle lines, the Americans counterattacked with the fortitude and determination that has defined our soldiers since the founding of our great republic. Decisive in this effort to repel the offensive was the courage and determination of the United States Third Army. From their initial position in France, over 100 miles away, they rushed northward to the Ardennes to reinforce their beleaguered comrades who were bravely holding the line. Their commander, the legendary Lieutenant General George S. Patton, sensed the magnitude of the situation and wrote in a letter to his wife, quote, "This is my biggest battle." He was right. The United States lost over 19,000 men in that fight, more than any other battle of World War II. By the time the Battle of the Bulge was over in January of 1945, the Allies had retaken all of the territory lost to the Nazis and were headed toward Berlin. But the real story of the Battle of the Bulge is the story of the soldiers who banded together, who fought together, and who worked under the most trying circumstances to preserve the Allied victory that was years in the making. The American soldier was resourceful, skilled, and innovative. He had grown up during the Great Depression. He knew hardship. When chaos ensued, units were broken apart, men were driven from their positions. These soldiers rejoined together and rebuilt their defenses. They were tough and tenacious and showed an indomitable spirit despite the adversity they faced. As many around them lay dead and wounded or freezing from the bitter cold, refusing to let the bulge break, they continued to fight, refusing also to let Hitler's final push breathe life. For a moment in history, the fate of the free world rested on their shoulders, rested on your shoulders. Today, 75 years later, we remember these great men. They sailed across an ocean to fight a war far from home, to defend others they knew little of. They left behind loved ones, unsure if they would ever see them again, but sure in their cause. And they faced an enemy who was determined to change our way of life by stealing our liberty and stealing our freedom. But together, they fought with honor and distinction, with undaunted courage, with great skill, and with an unmatched determination that all but assured victory. We must never forget these brave warriors who won that historic battle. Many of these men have perished amid the thundering and splintering forests of the Ardennes. And since the battlefield fell silent long ago, most of the veterans of that era have passed. However, we are blessed to have here today a group of heroes who still walk among us, legends in our time. These men represent America's greatest generation. These men are the soldiers who stood ground amidst the cracks of rifle fire, the whistling of incoming artillery, and the rumbling of oncoming tanks. These men are the heroes who refused to let tyranny and oppression triumph over freedom and liberty. These men saved us all. Buried in this most solemn ground are many of their comrades, those who never made it home. And overlooking the cemetery, between the two flagpoles, stands a lone cross, one that marks the grave of the man who commanded many of them, General Patton. Shortly after the Battle of the Bulge, Patton wrote in his journal, reflecting on the significance of the victory and the incredible bravery demonstrated by the American soldiers who took part in it. As he considered all that had been sacrificed to achieve victory, he expressed a sincere desire for his troops, who endured the extreme rigors of the battle, his men, to be given the foremost credit for their victory. That is, of course, precisely why we are here, to ensure we never forget their service to the nation, to properly recognize their commitment to our freedom, and honor the sacrifices they made so that we may live in peace. Together, this is the legacy that we celebrate today. May God bless our service members. May God bless our veterans. And may God bless our greatest of generations. And may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, His Royal Highness, the Grand Duke of Luxembourg.
Your Majesties, Mr. President of the Republic of Poland, Madam Speaker, Mr. Secretary of Defense, dear Mr. Gauck, dear veterans, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is with deep emotion that I address you today as we are gathered here to commemorate the 75th anniversary of one of the greatest military battles of the Second World War. As exceptional as the presence of the veterans is, as prestigious as our distinguished guests are, it is the solemnity of this cemetery that affects us most. We are humbled by this place of contemplation, silence, remembrance, and prayer. The American Military Cemetery, entrusted to the care of the United States government, will forever remain a sanctuary for my country. It symbolizes the fight of our independence as a free nation and is therefore part of our identity. The brave soldiers who found their last resting place here next to their general, General Patton, the liberator of Luxembourg, sacrificed their lives not only for their homeland, but for the freedom of our countries, for democracy and the rule of law. We are indebted and eternally grateful to them. They embody what President Franklin Roosevelt described as fighters for all humanity, not from one generation, but for all generations. 70 years ago, when Nazi troops launched the terrible offensive in an attempt to get to Antwerp and divide the Allied troops, a wave of destruction struck the Belgian and the Luxembourg Ardennes. The battle gave rise to exceptional bravery. The heroic resistance of the 28th American Infantry Division in Luxembourg, which decisively delayed the advance of the enemy during the first few days, the endurance and grit of the soldiers under extreme weather conditions, the leadership of General Patton, who with his Third Army saved Bastogne, thanks to his previous knowledge of the terrain from World War I. What a terrible price was paid by all. Tens of thousands of casualties were contained on both the Allied and the German side. More than 600 civilians died in Luxembourg territory, and more than 50% of our villages and towns were destroyed. The human and material damage was enormous. The Battle of the Bulge was a decisive movement before the total collapse of the Nazi regime. It was the greatest American battle of the Second World War, as Winston Churchill called it. But it remains the first and foremost a tragedy. To you, dear veterans, who have made a long journey to be here today, I would like to express, on behalf of the people of Luxembourg, my greatest respect, my sincere admiration, and my deep gratitude. In the course of your life, you will certainly have experienced many happy and less happy events, but the memory of those months spent with your comrades, definitely defending ultimately a certain idea of humanity, will stay with you forever. You mourn your brothers in arms as you think back to those terrific moments. Your outstanding service has been a source of inspiration for generations of men and women. We commend you for your bravery and loyalty, which have made you the best ambassadors of an America fighting for freedom and human rights. Today, it is up to us to make sure that those who have given their lives for a higher cause will never be forgotten. It is up to our generation, who have enjoyed freedom and peace, to pass on the torch of remembrance to the next generation. It is our responsibility not to fail in this duty. If so many countries are represented today, it is also to celebrate a story of reconciliation. In addition to the decisive role of the United States of America, we salute the allied countries in this conflict: the United Kingdom, France, Poland, Canada, the Netherlands, and Belgium. We spare a special thought for the great sacrifices made by the Russian people. But above all, we are deeply moved that Germany, the enemy of yesterday, has become the close friend of today. Are human beings capable of learning from their mistakes? I would say yes, under certain circumstances. If we are able to keep the memory alive and find it in our hearts to forgive. I believe this is what the cemetery in Ham invites us to do, and what makes this place so unique. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness. We will now observe a wreath presentation ceremony where 9 countries represented here today will pay tribute to the fallen Allied soldiers of the Battle of the Bulge. The first 4 wreaths will be presented by the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg and the United States of America. His Royal Highness, the Grand Duke of Luxembourg, the Secretary of Defense of the United States of America, His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, the Chairman of the American Battle Monuments Commission. Wreath Party, please stand and pay respects to your wreath. Wreath Party, thank you. You may now return to your seats. Wreaths will now be presented by the 7 visiting nations to commemorate this historic anniversary. His Majesty, the King of the Belgians, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Poland, His Excellency, the former President of the Republic of Germany, the Minister of State of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the Secretary of the Armies of the Republic of France, His Excellency, the Ambassador of Canada to Luxembourg, the Vice Chief of Defense Staff of the United Kingdom. Please pay respect to your wreath. Thank you. Please return to your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as we render a cannon salute to the fallen, followed by the Sonnerie Mort, taps, and the national anthems. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the departure of the colors and continue standing for the departure of the official party. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our official ceremony. Please be seated and remain in place until the departure of our dignitaries. Just a little glitch on the flyover, but we knew that. Thank you for all your help.
Please stay seated. We kindly ask for your patience while we facilitate your departure, so please stay seated until your buses arrive. We will start with the departure of the World War II veterans. So we kindly ask for your patience and stay seated. On va commencer avec les vétérans de la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. Donc, on vous demande de rester dans vos sièges.